make him an offer, Captain.
I'm fucking with you, see? You gotta fight through that shit.
Stuck on this.
Why so serious? Why so serious? Why so serious?
Well, another year come and gone. Only this time it's 2018, the worst goddamn year for movies ever. You might be wondering why I'm not wearing the suit, and well, it's 2018. I don't care. Like, I just don't care. I'm only like a week done with this freaking year, and like I have PTS flashbacks to it. It was that bad. So naturally, like every other critic on YouTube, I'm here to do my best and worst, and I'm starting off with the worst this year. I'm not really doing anything special. I'm not really doing anything interesting for it. It's just like another list. So yeah, this is it. I'm gonna start off with worst this time. So number 10 is Halloween, a movie that I wasn't really looking forward to at all, and big surprise, it didn't deliver. The thing about this entire franchise is that I don't care about slasher movies. I really don't. And the biggest thing that I said about this movie was that it wasn't really trying to do something new, but at the same time, it was. David Gordon Green and Danny McBride were trying to make an ode to the original and have it also be mixed with modern day comedy. And it really sucks because there are some good filmmaking techniques here, but overall, as a movie itself, it just falls flat. There's some really random moments of comedy that don't really make any sense. I think that the two kid characters that are in here, one for entirely comedic relief and the other one that's just kind of there to show that Michael's willing to kill kids now, doesn't make any goddamn sense. Jamie Lee Curtis is good, but she's wasted on bad material, and I think that her granddaughter is fine, but her daughter, played by Judy Greer, is of course awful. Yeah, this film, I wasn't a big fan of it at all. And now I think I'm gonna catch a lot of flack for the fact that I have this slasher movie in this list, but I don't have another slasher movie that came out earlier this year called Truth or Dare, and my answer to that is I liked Truth or Dare. I thought that it had an interesting concept, and for the most part, despite some questionable decisions, casting-wise and act-wise, I was thoroughly entertained by it, versus this movie, which I was almost entirely bored by the entire time. Number 9 is Bird Box, which is currently the most talked about movie of quite possibly the year so far. And it's another Netflix movie. Man, that spot seems to be working out really freaking well for Netflix, because that's the same spot that they put Bright in last year. Even to the point that it even protects against crappy movies, because this movie freaking sucked. And it's making me kind of hate Eric Heiserer as a writer even more so now, because that's the same overrated hack that gave us Arrival, which got him a goddamn Oscar nomination, and that movie still sucks. This movie, on the other hand, basically has Sandra Bullock happen to go completely blind against an entity that is haunting the world and causing people to randomly commit suicide. But yeah, so she shacks up with this random group of people. Like, it's like a who's who of like random cast. Like Trevante Rhodes is in it, Lil Rel Howery, John Malkovich, Jackie Weaver, Alita Battle Angel, Machine Gun Kelly. It's a weird freaking cast. And the movie is cutting between that setting and her with these two kids going on this river and for a really long extended period of time. And if you're wondering why I'm describing the exact instance of The Happening, it's because this movie is basically a more boring, slightly more cohesive version of The Happening, except The Happening is actually, you know, entertaining in a way.
Talk in a very positive manner, giving off good vibes. We're just here to use the bathroom, and we're just gonna leave. I hope that's okay.
I really don't get why people are talking about this movie this much, and honestly, if I'm being honest, then talking about this movie this much is kind of what ruined a lot of the hype for me. But yeah, it's a silly, stupid, nonsensical movie. Sandra Bullock is trying with really crap material, and yeah, it's not a good movie. Number 8 is a movie that was on my most anticipated list for this year, and apparently I'm just stupid because apparently Peter Jackson doesn't produce products the way that he directs them, and that would be Mortal Engines. Now, the interesting thing about this movie is that I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, it's not a good movie, but hear me when I say that the world that they set up is actually really interesting. This idea that in a one of the many post-apocalyptic movies we've gotten in the last couple of years that also just so happens to feature gorgeous-looking teenagers as the main characters, or people at least who act like teenagers, even though they're like 20 and 30-somethings. The idea of like taking cities and turning them into these giant vehicles that just plow over and mow and eat up other cities in order to like incorporate their food and resources and people into larger ones is actually an interesting setup. The problem is the movie does absolutely nothing with it and instead goes for the same bullshit YA, rebellion against a greater power, ultimate weapon bullshit that we've seen in every single one of these stupid things, coupled together with the fact that the lead actor in the movie is Robert friggin' Sheehan, who, if there's one thing that 2018 has taught me, it's that this guy might be the worst actor I think I've ever seen. So he's given some pretty terrible roles. Like, he was a trans stripper in Mutant. He was terrible in that. And I also know he was in that movie with David Tennant that came out that I'm currently not remembering the title of. But he's a really terrible actor, and 2018 needs to stop putting him in stuff. And outside of that, I would just say Mortal Engines, my biggest problem with it is that it's just a nothing movie. It does nothing with its premise. So number 7 is Widows. And don't get me wrong, 2018's been a disappointing year for mostly every single movie, but the thing about this movie that made it like a special kind of terrible is the fact that, so not only do you have an A-list director and a very, very A-list cast, seriously, like this, I was talking about Hotel Artemis earlier this year as having like the cast of the year and wasting almost all of them. The thing about this movie is that not only does this cast actually, for the most part, do a really good job, they're actually all giving really good performances. The problem is the script gives them absolutely nothing to work with. And not only that, but like character motivation, this script just makes no fucking sense. It's like, it's supposed to be, though, at least to my knowledge, see, the thing about movie marketing that always throws me off is that the movie marketing at the very least is supposed to tell you the base pitch. What is this movie about? And the movie, like I said, because I'm following the basic marketing, is telling me a heist, or at least I was supposed to be watching a heist movie. Except, A, the heist of this movie takes up all of about 5 minutes, and the rest of it is just a really long, really dumb, in-your-face message about, like, gentrification and corrupt politicians trying to do something with the lower socioeconomic areas of Chicago, and it gets into this really dumb subplot between Colin Farrell and his dad, played by Robert Duvall, that plays absolutely nothing towards the main plot of The Widows. And then if we're just talking about The Widows, who are the people who we're supposed to be rooting for in the movie, they're given little to nothing to do for most of the movie, to the point where I'm even wondering, I'm like, so wait a minute, this is supposed to be about strong female characters? So yeah, I believe in my review, I called this movie like the autistic version of Heat. Like, I'm sorry, anybody who compares this movie to Heat in any way, shape, or form, like, either A, hasn't seen that movie, or B, don't know what good heist movies are. Like, the one saving grace that I will give this movie is that Daniel Kaluuya at least is acting his ass off and actually gives like a really threatening, imposing performance, to the point where I'm almost wishing that I could see a movie entirely about his character. But yeah, Widows is a stupid movie, makes no goddamn sense, and I'm sorry, but when this is from the director of 12 Years a Slave, there's no goddamn excuse why this movie should be this lazy and this terrible.
Why? Because no one thinks we have the balls to pull this off.
Number 6 is another lazy, horrifically edited mess of a movie from a director who previously, I thought at least, had made some good movies. The Predator, from Shane Black. Once again, suffering from the usual problems of a cast of way too many people and not knowing what to do with any one of them, wasting a bunch of big-name actors, having a really awesome setup from a previously good 80s movie, and totally, like, just sucking all the joy and anticipation out of it. Seems to be the going trend for a lot of movies that come out nowadays, but this movie seemed to be a special kind of terrible, only because when I can't even tell what's going on in the action, which is supposed to be, you know, the entertaining parts about these movies, that's a problem. Then on top of that, you're adding practical effects versus CG effects, and when even in the dark areas, which this movie is horrifically lit, by the way, I can even tell which parts are practical and which parts are CG. That's also a problem. And also, in a Predator movie, we get to see Jacob Tremblay play an autistic superhuman, and we get to see autistic predator dogs. I'm not kidding. Those are things that actually happen in this movie. Boyd Holbrook is trying, and another recurring theme that seems to be happening on this list, Trevante Rhodes getting fucked in the ass by just any movie that he seems to be in 2018 between this and Bird Box. And overall, the biggest disappointment, in the month of September, Paul Feig made a better movie than Shane Black did. Just let that run through your head for a second. Number 5 is a movie that I almost feel bad for putting in my top 10 simply for the fact that I did enjoy this movie while I was watching it. I was also high out of my mind when I was watching it, which quite frankly is the only way to watch this movie, which makes me realize why this movie has this spot here, and that's A Wrinkle in Time. Based on a novel by some author. I really feel bad not mentioning her name, but honestly, with how terrible this movie was, and also how difficult she made her book to freaking adapt. She's the caring and loving story of another, like, really pretty girl who, like, thinks that she's ugly, going on a quest across the universe in order to find her dad who's disappeared through the power of love and the help of 3 mystical spirits, which is basically just an excuse for Ava DuVernay to put Oprah in a giant chicken suit and basically have people worship her. I'm not kidding. There's literally a scene where they're brought to their first alien planet and they're literally just prancing around trying to be all whimsical, and they literally have Oprah, who's been in a giant form this entire time, get her cheek brushed by the little kid played by Derek McCabe. That's actually a scene that happens in this movie. And the rest of this movie is really just mostly trippy, psychedelic nonsense. It's trying to be whimsical when really it just comes off as really forced. I don't really like or care about any of these characters, and don't get me wrong, there are a few genuinely emotional moments, but for the most part, they're mostly just overridden by just the pure confusion of what's going on. That's the problem. Like, I was entertained by this movie, but I was entertained by the fact that I had no idea what was going on for most of it until I managed to reach the last part, which again just proves power of love. Michael Pena and Zach Galifianakis are good in it. Chris Pine's really good in it. Derek McCabe, what the fuck are you doing? Levi Miller, you suck, go away. Yeah, this movie's not good. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Do I need to say even more about this movie than what's already been said? Everybody's seen this movie. It's made like $700 million worldwide, once again proving that when it comes to things that make money at the box office, nothing kicks ass like Transformers, Marvel superheroes, and dinosaurs. Yeah, in a franchise that has already suffered from The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, this movie somehow manages to outstupid all of them, and the worst part is, it's probably got the second best director in the franchise after Spielberg himself. J.A. Bayona, the guy who did The Orphanage and A Monster Calls last year, which is 2 years ago actually, which is a film that I actually really wanted to see, has to direct a script from Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly. Colin Trevorrow, keep in mind, is also the same guy that gave us The Book of Henry.
We can't put you in a gifted school.
Because it's better for my psychosocial development for me to interact with a peer group in a normal school environment.
That guy almost directed a Star Wars movie. He's trying with really awful material to work with. The entire second half of this movie is basically just a horror movie about a dinosaur chasing around a girl who's revealed to be a clone, and the reasoning for that makes no sense at first, except the problem is that it's only put in there to build up to the ending, which you've seen it, you know the ending. They basically let the dinosaurs loose on the main world, and the worst part is they try and pass that off as like whimsical and, oh, it's for the continuation of a species that is already supposed to be extinct and has already been completely manipulated and abused by mankind. Paper cutout villains, Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard are rinsing and repeating their arc. Yeah, it's a waste of goddamn time. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Number 3 is Pacific Rim Uprising. Again, a movie that I really should have known better about going into it, but John Boyega was a better lead than Charlie Hunnam, I guess, is the best thing I can say about it. Poor Steven S. Knight has absolutely nothing to work with. He's going based off a script that it's very clear Guillermo del Toro had nothing to do with. It's very obvious that all the really cool, fun elements that really made the Pacific Rim much more than the simple monster movie that everybody thought it to be are nowhere to be found. Now, granted, this could just qualify as like a really typical bland blah movie, but the thing that I think sets this apart is its usage of Charlie Day. Charlie Day is a guy who's been getting a lot of flack over the last few years for being another one of the million comedic actors who like gives the same performance in every movie, but I really like him. I've never understood where the hate comes from, but this movie has kind of the audacity to go out of its way to twist it so that not only is Charlie Day a completely different character than he was in the first one, but also he's now the villain, which makes no goddamn sense. The explanation they come up for it makes no sense. The way that they bring the monsters back makes no goddamn sense. The fights, sure, they're more well lit and they're in the daytime, but the story is so weak I don't even care about it. Yeah, Kaylee Spaney's in this movie. She's better in this than she was in Bad Times at the El Royale, I guess. Number 2 is a movie that's really going to confuse people as to both its placement on this list and just for being in this list in general, depending on how many people actually saw this movie, and that's Red Sparrow. The next outing that shows that Jennifer Lawrence is slowly becoming more and more, or should I say less and less relevant? That's the word I was going for. She's a spy. This movie is trying to be a James Bond-esque movie, I thing. It's directed by Francis Lawrence, the guy who directed the last couple of Hunger Games movies since 2, and I fell asleep for like the first 20 minutes of this movie, and then the rest that I saw, it was really boring, not interesting spy stuff. Jennifer Lawrence is just giving the same mopey, bored expression that she's been giving in every movie that she's been in since X-Men Apocalypse. And yeah, I don't care. And the problem is, the filmmaking and the story itself isn't as intriguing or as batshit crazy like it got in Mother, which is again the biggest thing of what I give that movie credit for, is that at the very least, I remember most of what happens in that movie, and I remember the reasons for why I didn't like it, versus this one, I was just bored by. I could care less about it. Joel Edgerton is in this. Matthias Schoenaerts is in this, if that's even how you pronounce this name. There's a twist, if you can even call it that, concerning Jeremy Irons, and I'm like, I don't care. I don't care about this movie. Like, I really don't. Like, there's movies that I don't care about, and don't get me wrong, I haven't cared about most of the movies that I've seen this year, but at the very least, they've been entertaining in some way and engaging, and this movie just didn't have any of that. So number one for a worst list is always interesting, at least for me, whenever I'm ranking it, because I'm like, okay, do I go by the movie that, I just didn't like? Do I go by the movie that had the poorest amount of filmmaking, or do I go by the movie that just made me the angriest, regardless of whether or not it actually had good filmmaking involved? Because don't get me wrong, there have been a few good movies that I've seen that like legitimately made me angry about one thing. But I think this movie takes the cake because above all else, this movie was just fascinating in how terrible it was. And that would be Clint Eastwood's first outing this year, the 15-17 to Paris. So in this movie, Clint Eastwood tells the story of the 2015 terrorist attack that occurred on the train that was going from Amsterdam to Paris, and chronicles the story of the 3 people who ended up stopping the attack, played by the real-life survivors. And the thing about this movie, besides having all of Eastwood's typical things in it, you know, the one-take style, the, like, really kind of non-engaging dialogue, and besides the fact that, you know, you bring back the main 3 guys to relive a trauma that they've already relived, just that alone is enough to make this movie terrible. But the movie has the audacity to go out of its way and like be a preachy thing about like serving your nation and what priorities come first in people's lives for like the first half. And it's like really weird because it's like, I think it's trying to show like how these guys like, oh, we're always rebels against authority, and that's why they were like destined to be the ones that take down this attack.
I don't know, man. You ever just feel like life is just pushing us towards something, like some greater purpose?
And then the middle half of the movie is literally just like them partying across Europe. And like, I know that people like were giving 50 Shades Freed a lot of crap because like the first 10 minutes of that movie were like nothing but like a vacation or like a vacation highlight reel. And yeah, I'm sure they're not wrong. I wasn't gonna watch that movie, but that's kind of what the middle half of this movie feel like. To the point where once they finally get to the actual attack and stopping them, I'm like, A, I don't care. B, this should be a lot more interesting, but it isn't. This might just be me, and feel free to come at me and criticize me for all you want for this, but taking real-life heroes and forcing them to relive a very traumatic event, I'm sure, for the purposes of filmmaking, essentially for the art of bread and circus, for the purposes of a mainstream audience, comes off as really kind of offensive. And of course, I'm sure that's not what Clint Eastwood's intentions was. This was just a weird movie to sit through. Like, coming out, like, I'm gonna remember this movie for a very long time, and not for the right reasons at all. And for me, at least, that's what makes a movie, like, truly bad, is when I'm remembering it not for being entertaining, not for having something interesting to say, not for having like a good performance or good, not for anything else other than just how ludicrous it was and what it tried to accomplish, how spectacularly it failed at it, and just how much it missed in terms of like just filmmaking in general. And that's why this movie makes my number 1 worst of the year. And what also kind of hurts the most is that this isn't even Clint Eastwood's only movie that he did this year, because the dude at 90 years old somehow still managed to pump out 2 movies for this piece of shit year. The other movie, though, obviously is nowhere near this because it was, needless to say, much better. So yeah, that's my list. That's my worst of list. I'm not doing dishonorable mentions because I don't care. And yeah, sorry this video wasn't like 2 hours long, because again, I didn't feel like talking about movies that much for this year. That's what 2018 did for me for movies, even for my worst of year. So yeah, I guess that's it. See ya. You guys know what to do.